All right, welcome. Today, we're diving into an absolutely incredible story. We're going to start with the invisible code that's running the show inside every single one of your cells, and then zoom all the way out to tell the epic, multi-billion-year story of life on this planet. Let's get right into it.
So think about this for a second. There is a single, secret code that connects a microscopic microbe, a gigantic blue whale, and you. One code. So what is it? And how on earth does it manage to write the entire sprawling, beautiful story of life? That's the mystery we're going to unravel today.
To answer that huge question, we've got to start small. I mean, impossibly small. We need to go right inside the cell and take a look at the fundamental blueprint of life itself.
At its very core, everything begins with this one simple concept: heredity. You know, it's the reason we look like our parents. It's just the passing down of traits, this biological inheritance that connects one generation to the next. And the things doing all that passing down, they're called genes.
You know, for the longest time, nobody knew what this genetic material actually was. But then, back in 1944, these three scientists, Avery, McCarty, and MacLeod, they finally cracked it. They proved that a molecule called DNA is the master blueprint in pretty much every single living thing. This was a game-changing discovery, and it unlocked basically everything we know today.
Okay, so life has a blueprint. It's DNA. But, just having a blueprint isn't enough, right? You have to be able to actually read it and then build something with it. So how does a cell do that?
Well, the answer is a process so fundamental, so important, they call it the central dogma of biology. This is the master plan for how the instructions locked away in your DNA get turned into proteins. And proteins are the little workhorses that do almost everything in your body, from building your hair to fighting off diseases.
And it all happens in three main steps. First, inside the cell's nucleus, a copy of a gene is made. Think of it like making a photocopy of one page from a giant instruction manual. That copy, the message, then gets translated by the cell's machinery. And finally, a little molecular assembly line moves along the message, building a protein piece by piece. It's an incredible factory, all happening in a split second.
And figuring out how to read this code? Well, that was a massive deal. In 1968, Dr. Hargovan Khorana was one of the scientists who won the Nobel Prize for cracking it, for figuring out which of those three-letter words in our DNA coded for which building block. He basically helped us learn the language of life. But what happens if there's a mistake, a typo in the blueprint? Well, that's called a mutation. It's just a sudden, random change in a gene. It might be tiny, but sometimes even a small change can have a really big effect. And this, right here, is the absolute key to our whole story. Mutations are the raw material for all change.
So, how does a tiny typo in a gene lead to the grand, sprawling story of life? Well, when these little changes, these mutations, pile up over millions and millions of years, they can eventually lead to entirely new creatures. This slow, gradual development is what we call evolution.
Now, for a long time, there were two main ideas about how this worked. One idea, from a guy named Lamarck, was that traits you get during your life could be passed on. The classic example is a giraffe stretching its neck to reach high leaves, and then its kids are born with longer necks. But Darwin's theory was different. He said no, the variation is already there. Some giraffes are just born with slightly longer necks by pure chance. Those with the advantage, the longer necks, get more food, survive better, and pass on those long neck genes. That's natural selection. And it's the idea that all the evidence points to.
Here's basically how Darwin put it. Life is a tough competition. And in that struggle, nature selects the winners. Those are the ones with the right traits to survive and win in their environment. They get to live, reproduce, and pass on their winning features. You've probably heard it called survival of the fittest.
Okay, so that's the theory. But what's the actual proof? I mean, where's the evidence for this grand idea? Well, it turns out it's literally all around us, and it is incredibly compelling. Let's look at a few examples.
First up, just look at these different limbs. A human hand for grabbing, an ox's leg for walking, a whale's flipper for swimming, a bat's wing for flying. I mean, on the outside, they do totally different jobs. But if you look at the bones inside, the underlying structure is almost identical. The only explanation that makes sense is that we all inherited that basic bone plan from a shared ancestor way back in the past.
Then there's the evidence you're carrying around in your own body right now, vestigial organs. These are leftover parts that are useless to us but are fully functional in other animals. Your appendix, pretty useless, but in some plant-eating mammals, it's a key part of digestion. Your tailbone, that's what's left of a tail. These things are like little echoes of our deep evolutionary history.
And of course, there's the most direct evidence of all: fossils. These preserved remnants of ancient life, buried in layers of rock, are like a physical history book of life on Earth. They show us exactly what used to live here, and how those life forms have changed over incredible spans of time. The deeper we dig, the older the story gets.
And how do we know how old these fossils are? We're not just guessing. We have incredible techniques like carbon dating. It was developed by a Nobel Prize winner, Willard Libby, and it lets us measure the decay of a natural radioactive element, carbon-14, to figure out the age of fossils with amazing accuracy. It puts real dates on that timeline.
And finally, we have living proof of evolution in action, so-called connecting links. Just look at the duck-billed platypus. This animal is amazing. It lays eggs, just like a reptile, but it also has hair and feeds its young with milk like a mammal. It's like a living, breathing snapshot of an evolutionary transition, showing us how one group can evolve from another.
So, all of this evidence, this whole grand story, brings us to the final chapter for today, which is the story of us, the evolutionary journey that led to modern humans. Our own journey is just immense. It started maybe 70 million years ago with some of the first monkey-like animals. Fast forward a long way to about 4 million years ago, and you get early apes like Australopithecus walking around Africa. Then, a huge step forward. Around 1.5 million years ago, Homo erectus, the upright man, appears, walking on 2 legs. Much later, you get Neanderthals, and then finally, just 50,000 years ago, which is nothing in geologic time, people who look just like us finally arrived on the scene. And here's where things get absolutely wild. After millions of years of slow biological change, our cultural evolution just exploded? Agriculture only started about 10,000 years ago. We only invented writing 5,000 years ago. And modern science? It's barely 400 years old. On the vast timeline of our species, basically everything we call civilization happened in the last few seconds of the last minute of the last day. So that's really the main takeaway. For millions of years, our story was written for us by genes, by random chance, by nature. But today, right now, our evolution is being shaped more and more by our own inventions, by our culture and our technology. It took 70 million years of evolution to get us to this point. But where we go next? Well, for the first time in the history of life, that's up to us. And that leaves us with a really big question to think about. What kind of ancestor will we be?